Hi, everybody. My name is Nettie Legassi. I am the moderator for today's session on standards, and we are really happy to have you all with us. Today, we will be talking about several NISO standards and recommended practices. And before we get to the speakers, I just have a few introductory slides to get the juices flowing. I want to give you a brief outline for what's happening today. I will talk a minute or two about standards in information distribution and what these do for us as information professionals. What is NISO? NISO is the National Information Standards Organization and the organization that I work for. And then we'll happily have 4 presentations talking about different work at NISO. So what are standards? Standards put things together, essentially. They help make sure that different technologies, different companies, different interactions connect to each other. They ensure that certain processes can be accomplished the same way, and this can free up developer time for more bespoke sorts of work that might be differentiators. They provide understanding to people in the industry about how certain procedures should be done, so it provides a common understanding on our directions. They help consumers or users or purchasers understand what they're getting in their product. And ultimately, using standards builds trust among all of the interactors in the supply chain. So they grease the wheels of information creation and dissemination. And here you see a little image of all of the different kinds of interactions in our space in information creation and publication. And standards are the pieces that put it all together so that we all can interoperate with each other, which is really quite essential, even though we all work for different companies, different organizations. What's NISO? NISO stands for the National Information Standards Organization, but we are quite international, I like to think. We are a nonprofit industry trade association that's accredited by the American National Standards Institute. We have many members who are publishers, system providers, libraries, associations, consultants, all kinds of different members. And our mission is to develop and maintain technical standards that are related to the kinds of things we encounter in our space: information and documentation, discovery and distribution of all of this material that we create here. Something that I can't stress enough is that NISO is really a volunteer-driven organization. So yes, we are membership-based, and we do have a small staff, but all of the work that you're going to hear about today and the work that is in our other projects is done by volunteers, people like you, people who work for companies, libraries, providers, associations, and think that it's important to contribute to a particular project. So I want to really recognize all of the people who contribute their time to the NISO work, and we do our best to promote and communicate it. So that's why we're here today. NISO is not the only standards organization in our space. We're focusing on NISO work here today, but I also want to bring your attention to other standards organizations. And this is really just a few that work in our space: ISO, the International Standards Group; W3C, the web publications; the Book Industry Study Group; and Editor, EDI sorts of exchanges. So these are all groups that work in our space, and we cooperate with each other and communicate with each other for everyone's benefit. So participating in NISO is, as I mentioned, a broad range of participants: libraries, journal publishers, associations, consultants, and so on. All of these people work together in the different working groups to put together standards that are usable by everyone. That's a really important piece of NISO's work, is making sure that the standards and recommended practices that we create and publish are acceptable and usable by everyone in this space. So today's presentation, I'm very happy to be introducing 4 representative projects that are undergoing work at NISO. And we put them in an order that we hope will make sense to all of you. So the order of presentations today is moving, in a sense, from researcher to reader. So the first presentation today, credit, is focusing on the earliest stage of the 4, researcher, output, and drafting, and Alison McGonigal O'Connell will be providing an overview of credit. Next on the range is MICA, Manuscript Exchange Common Approach, and this is also sort of pre-publication phase where manuscripts are shared, and Tony Alves will be discussing MICA. Further along in the stage is publisher platform. So how do publishers manage their publications and move their content, and this might have effect on many other people. We also have content platform migrations work, and that is Kim Steinle. And then last today, actually users accessing the material, user discovery. We'll be hearing from Rachel Kessler, who will talk about the Open Discovery Initiative, another NISO work. So without further ado, I would like to pass the baton over to Alison McGonigal O'Connell, who will be talking about credit. Thanks, Alison.
Thank you, Nettie. That was a great overview. And thanks to everyone, thanks to SSP and to NISO and to my co-presenters and everyone who's listening today. I'm really excited to share with you a little bit about the contributor roles taxonomy. And as Nettie mentioned, this will be an overview. So I'm, as Nettie said, Alison McGonigal O'Connell. I'm a consultant, and today I'm speaking to you within my role as the co-chair, one of the co-chairs for the working group for credit. And that's a position I've had for a few years now. I was first involved with credit around 2015 when I was working for Aries Systems, who are the creators of Editorial Manager, which was an early integrator in terms of the taxonomy and being able to solicit authors at submission. So I've been in the publishing space for about 15 years, more recently on the software as a service side. So what is credit? So credit at its core is a 14-role taxonomy and a set of best practices that sort of underpin that and suggest the best ways to adopt and implement. But it's not super prescriptive, and the end goal is to make the contributions to scholarly output able to be captured, stored, and shared in a more transparent and consistent way than legacy ways of doing authorship would allow for. And so when we talk about credit, we're really talking about something that dates back as many as 8 or 9 years. I think the idea first came up during a workshop, which was co-organized by the Wellcome Trust and Harvard. And it included some of the key stakeholders that remain involved in the project and supporting the taxonomy today, including Liz Allen, who at the time worked for the Wellcome Trust and today is a co-chair of credit and works at F1000. And so shortly after having that initial workshop, I think the stakeholders engaged ICMJE and identified a scope for a pilot project. And sort of emerging from that interaction are the 14 roles that we talk about when we talk about credit today. However, because of the nature of that partnership and the players involved, the original scope of credit was really focused on biomedical and science rather than sort of a more broad cross-discipline view. And we frequently across these years that I've been involved have gotten feedback from different disciplines like social sciences or humanities with questions about, additional roles. And, that's sort of something we've always been really happy to hear about in terms of feedback and to keep sort of on the roster for discussion as we move forward in terms of evolving the taxonomy. And we'll talk more about that as I move along because we have some exciting developments to that end. But at the end of the day, the aim, I think, of these groups and of this work was to develop a taxonomy that would be practical, simple to implement, and then, sort of to minimize the potential for too much complexity or misuse. And so some of the challenges that the original workshop stakeholders identified and wanted to try to create solutions to included, what you see here on the screen. There are problems with authorship. And those problems have to do with scope, with accountability questions, a trend toward multi-author papers and seeing that globally the trend is away from lone authors. And that's been happening. I think I once saw a graph that's very colorful and showed a trajectory of, a downward slope across decades, really. And that also supports the trend toward team science in many disciplines. And of course, institutions and funders have a lot of requirements around gathering information to support assessment of researchers. And we all also are probably quite familiar with the idea of publish or perish. And, at the same time, space limitations have gone away. So there's no need, for example, to sort of pare down author lists. If there are 5,000 authors, we can actually fit those today in a web environment. So there's still no accountability or transparency into who's actually doing what. And so those are really the key challenges that led to the development of credit. And so here is the solution as that group identified it. So these are 14 roles that respond to some of the responsibilities that contributors take on when they're working on manuscripts within this space. And so I won't go into today what each of these entails, but just to put them up here and to show you this is the taxonomy as it exists today. And I'll point you to some resources where you can dig down a bit more and understand, what each of these mean. In terms of getting contributors to use these roles, typically, though, the taxonomy can be applied in many different ways, but the suggestion is that every contributor named on a paper within an environment that's adopted credit would have at least one role. But of course, many authors will have multiple. And so that's just sort of a very simple explanation. And now I want to show an example of the way that credit shows up on published work. So we have here PLOS Manuscript, and you can see that I've circled an author as well as this author's tab. So I just want to show you that at first glance, we don't see any credit information, but when I mouse over the individual contributor's name, you can see the roles right up front. And these are the roles that this particular author is associated with for this manuscript. And so then I can do the same thing for another author, and you can see the same thing. But when I use the authors tab, I can actually see this long list, which I could search if I needed or anything like that. So this is basically a nice example of the human readable version of the credit information. And this is just another example here. This is from Welcome Open Research, which is a publishing outlet through F1000. And so you can see that each contributor has several roles listed against their contribution. And what's also important, but that I won't be able to show you today, is that credit is most useful, and certainly it is recommended when you also export the contributor roles information within the JATS XML. And so what that does is allow for machine readability, which is really important for the scholarly record and the research lifecycle. And so now the next question that I'd like to answer is, who is credit? we've talked a little bit about some of the originators, but now let's talk about some of the adopters and the wider community. And to do this, I'd actually like to show you, this is the credit website. And this website was actually made possible by a recent collaboration that's really provided a lot of momentum for the project, and that collaboration is with NISO. So credit is going to be lodged as a formal standard probably sometime this fall within NISO. Members are working on evaluating and voting on and doing all of the standardized processes that NISO is so great at getting done. But in the meantime, we have some nice visibility and some great community building happening at this website. And so these publisher level adopters are some of the earlier adopters, as I say. And when we think about credit adoption, there are also, it's useful for institutions to adopt credit. So in this case, we have University of Glasgow recommending that its researchers use credit roles to make clear their contributions on manuscripts. And then we have a number of tech organizations that are integrators of the taxonomy within their tools, and also the publishing outlets. So I mentioned Wellcome is one of them, and there are others. And then when we're talking about credit adoption, we also have to think at the journal level, because for many publishers, it's not just one journal, of course. And so we've started a very early and homegrown effort of trying to collect journal level information about credit adoption. And this list is in truth much longer, because we know that some of the largest publishers like Elsevier, for example, have adopted for thousands of journals. And just, you know, when you're dealing with that amount of information, it takes a bit of time to get it all. But in time, this list will be complete, and we'll be sharing it on the website as well. We're trying to keep our community engaged and involved by sharing some adopter stories. These are actually use cases, really, because as I mentioned earlier, the way that one organization implements credit won't necessarily be the same. For example, where in workflow you choose to solicit the contributors for these roles. Some folks will do it upfront at submission. Others might not want to bother with it at that point in the event that a manuscript isn't accepted, for example. So these adopter stories are really interesting to anyone who would be considering adoption, I think. And so, of course, we also want the community to be involved. And so we offer a space where you can indicate your interest in participating within our working group. And we hope that you will sign up for this, and as well as to advocate for credit if you think it will be useful within your own publication workflows or institution, or even if you're at a tech company and an integration would support your constituents well. And so another thing you can do is you can always reach out to any of the co-chairs or anyone on the working group. We're all very happy to talk about credit with you and to help you if you have questions along the way, or to point you to some of the integrations that could work for you. You can either reach out through this email, because it will come to us, or you could chat to us directly. And also, so recently, again, on the theme of our partnership with NISO, we've launched some social media, which again is just aimed at sort of gathering a community and keeping them well informed, and giving multiple venues for questions or feedback to come in as we are sort of standardizing the taxonomy, and then moving forward to being able to act on feedback and take some steps toward the future. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Allison, and very pleased to be sponsoring credit these days. So our next presenter is Tony Alves from Aries Systems, who will be talking to us about MICA, Manuscript Exchange Common Approach. Tony, floor is yours.
Thank you, Nettie. I'm going to be talking about Manuscript Exchange Common Approach. My name is Tony Alves. I'm the Director of Product Management at Aries Systems. I've been working in scholarly publishing almost 30 years, and the last 20 years I've been focused on building workflow software that is used in the publishing process, primarily for manuscript submission, peer review tracking, production, tracking everything from the point of the researcher submitting their manuscript all the way through to the point at which the manuscript is ready to go out to a publishing platform or out to print, and both. So manuscript exchange common approach. Why do people transfer manuscripts from one system to another? Well, a big part of the challenge in scholarly publishing is that researchers can get very frustrated by redundancy of effort that they go through. They they often submit a manuscript at a journal. That manuscript will get rejected about 85% of the time. And they then have to take all of that, all those files, and go to another journal where they then submit to that journal, where the editor might then search for reviewers who may have already reviewed that manuscript. And so you can see that there is this cycle of authors going from journal to journal, and each of those journals engaging reviewers in a process where a manuscript is being sort of cycled through these different journals. And in some organizations, there is an interest in keeping those manuscripts within the publishing organization, and many of you understand that to be a cascading workflow. So, this is something that is very common and encouraged in the industry, but it can be extremely frustrating for the authors, extremely frustrating for editors and reviewers. And so there have been a number of initiatives in the past that Ares has been involved in, and that some of our competitors have been involved in, where we have been developing ways to transfer manuscripts from one system to another. And what got frustrating for us is that we were developing one-off solutions for different, to work with different other systems. We also, in the meantime, have noticed that there has been a big emphasis on preprint servers and being able to have manuscripts posted to a preprint server, and then make it easy for the author to push that preprint to their favored journal, and vice versa, an author submitting their manuscript to a journal, and that journal offering to push it out to a preprint server. There are also a lot of authoring tools that have come onto the market, collaborative authoring tools, language editing tools, and that sort of thing. And so what you can imagine is there are a lot of opportunities for researchers who are working in these different environments. What they want to do is they want to be able to easily push those manuscripts to submission systems like the one I work with. So what is Mecca? Mecca is a solution to those problems I just talked about. It's a method of easily exchanging manuscripts from system to system. It could be from a preprint server to a system, or from a submission system to a vendor who might be doing work like taxonomy work or image checking or that sort of thing. So the original team that started working on the Manuscript Exchange Common Approach project is actually a group of competitors. So Ares Systems with Editorial Manager, Clarivate with Scholar One, eJournal Press with EJP, Highwire with their bench press product, and also the Public Library of Science, who were working on their own submission system at the time. So we all got together and started talking about what would make the transfer of manuscripts between our systems a lot easier, so that authors wouldn't have to upload files and provide metadata each time their paper was rejected and they wanted to bring it to another journal. So we began work on a project that I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. But one of the things that I wanted to also point out was that in 2018, we approached NISO and talked about it really expanding this project. And so we put together a working group in May of 2018. And that was a really fantastic experience. We had a really wonderful group that really was across the industry. We had society publishers, commercial publishers, organizations that are suppliers, and organizations like JISC and IEEE, American Physical Society, Cold Spring Harbor, a lot of different organizations, the National Library of Medicine, who all we all met every 3 weeks and worked through what this manuscript exchange common approach would look like. Again, the use cases that we were focused on were the transfer of manuscripts and reviews between journals. The sub cases that we considered were transfers of manuscripts between preprint servers and journals and vice versa. Importing manuscripts from authoring systems, and being able to export manuscripts to other services like repositories, compositors, etc. And I'll talk a bit more about the specifics of manuscript exchange common approach, but this is a schematic that shows the concept. And so here we have a preprint server where a researcher has uploaded their paper to the preprint server. And there's an opportunity for them to then push that paper to a submission system. It might be submission system A or B or C. At that point, if you were to assume that the paper went from the preprint server to system A, and system A decided that paper was not within their area of interest, they might then offer to push that paper to submission system B to another journal that might be more appropriate. And then submission system B, that paper might go through that journal's peer review process, get accepted, and MECA could be then used also to push that paper out to other services, perhaps production services or other types of services that are offered in the marketplace. So the Manuscript Exchange Common Approach project itself, we worked on 5 different areas. We really focused on 5 different areas. We defined a common vocabulary so that we were all understanding what it was that we were talking about when we started to develop the MECA standard. We talked about how those files and information would be packaged up so that everybody could understand what was coming to their system. The identity, we talked about how people are identified, or rather how the package is identified, so that you know who is sending it, how it's going to get sent, the transmission aspect, what kind of data and how that data is going to be structured, and how we were going to structure peer review data, such as reviewer information, the reviews themselves. And that was a really interesting area, because one of the things that I think is important to note is that the article metadata is based on JATS, Journal Article Tag Suite by the National Library of Medicine. And so but there is no standard for structuring peer review data. And so that was a big part of what we did was we created a schema based on JATS to define how peer review information would be identified in XML. One of the things that we did was we focused a lot on common, easy to implement technologies. So a XML document to contain the article metadata, an XML document to contain the review metadata, and using secure FTP as a way to transfer files and metadata between systems. We are going to be convening a standing committee to continue the MECA work, and one of the first things we'll be looking at is an API interaction rather than FTP, but we really wanted to begin with something that was a commonly understood technology that everybody could work with. Let me just. I wanted to really focus a bit on the principles. What MECA does is it facilitates the transfer between publications and platforms. It's not defining what the it doesn't define the specifics of everything that gets transferred. It's really up to the individual platforms to determine what information they're going to pull in and what information they're going to populate in their own systems. But it's not forcing different systems to accept all data that's part of the MiCA package. It defines a minimum viable product. It identifies just enough data to establish a submission in a receiving site. It's also important to realize that there isn't a clearinghouse or a database that holds the paper. It really is a process where the package goes from one system, one publisher's journal using a submission system like Editorial Manager or Scholar One or EJP, and pushes that information to another journal that's using a different system, using protocols that we've all agreed to and best practices that we've all agreed to. And then, so finally, in conclusion, this was a really fantastic experience. We believe that it was an extremely successful collaboration with stakeholders from across various parts of our scholarly publishing ecosystem. As you saw from the list of participants, we had a lot of representation from many different parts of the ecosystem. It is a low barrier for entry, and it was approved as a recommended practice by NISO in just, I think, last month. And if you want more information on the Manuscript Exchange Common Approach protocols, you can see there's the MECA webpage and the NISO webpage, and you can always contact us at the email address that is here on this slide. And with that, I'd like to turn it back to Nettie.
Great. Tony, thank you so much. That was a very good description overview. Our third presenter today will be Kim Steinle of Duke University Press, who will be talking about a project that is still underway. It's all yours, Kim. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Nettie. So I'm Kim Steinley. I'm the Library Relations and Sales Manager for Duke University Press. And along with Athena Heppner from the University of Central Florida, I am a co-chair of the Content Platform Migrations Working Group. And I want to give a brief update of how our project is going. So for those maybe not familiar, to say, well, why do you need a working group? What's the problem? What are you trying to solve? Most people that we've talked to have been through a migration. And most people that we've talked to have a story. Maybe not a horror story, but a story where some things went wrong. So we realized pretty quickly that there was a lot of interest in content platform migrations and that they were happening a lot, and that maybe some structure around those was needed, especially with digital content being more and more prevalent. These are happening a lot. What we also realized was that maybe there just wasn't enough communication across the stakeholder groups. So from my experience, having gone through migration back in late 2017 for Duke University Press, one of the things that I saw was publishers were talking to librarians, publishers were talking to the content vendor, but the content platform vendor and the librarians weren't really talking to each other or didn't have a good sense of what each other needed or what kinds of things that they had to do for a platform migration. So about maybe a little bit over a year ago, 15 months ago, Athena and I were both members of the NISO's Information Policy and Analysis Topic Committee, and that committee was looking for ideas for new working groups. We both had platform migrations fresh on our minds, Duke having gone through one, and Athena having gone through many. So many migrations, as I said, and this breaks it down a little bit by stakeholder group. Publishers hopefully are not migrating more than every 5 to 10 years. Content platform vendors are onboarding different publishers, maybe 5 to 10 per year. Then there's the librarians, and the librarians have to deal with all of the migrations that are happening, which are 10 plus per year. And Athena had done a quick straw poll at the beginning of the project, and she found 10 plus per year could even be a little bit underreporting how many migrations librarians have to tackle in a given year. So as I said, there was a lot of interest immediately when we put this idea on the table. And the good news is that we didn't have to look very far to find volunteers. Many people stepped up and were interested to be a part of the project. So what we tried to do was, keeping the group small, still have representation from across the major stakeholder groups. So we have librarians, we have publishers, we have content platform providers. We also have other stakeholder groups, maybe other vendors, such as authentication vendors or discovery system vendors that are important to have as a part of the conversation. So what we did in order to not make the group too big is that we would have different working group members liaise with those other vendors to either find out more information, what's important to them during a migration, and what they hoped that we would include, because we do want to pull in as many voices as we can. And so the one thing that became pretty clear was our common goal. And so what we're trying to do in this working group is to provide a recommended practice to offer some standardization across content platform migrations and to improve communication. Every part of the project that we have dealt with so far has talked about communication. So improving communication across the groups is key to the success of platform migrations in general. So some things that we did to prepare ourselves. We talked to a lot of people who had gone through migrations. Tell us what you think that we need to cover, what's important. What do we need to know? Who do we need to talk to? That was really helpful. We did some surveys as well. We looked at communications that vendors had sent out, both good and maybe not so good. And that informed us of what we needed to look at in terms of a checklist that our own group could send out about the different actions that need to be taken. Post, during, and pre-post migration is that there are a lot of things that happen when the migration happens and things go wrong, but there are so many things that are leading up to that launch of a new platform that require action from the various stakeholders. We also thought about timelines. When is the best time to do a migration? How long will it take? If it launches at a time that's really busy for librarians, what does that mean? Should there be more lead time? And that was helping us inform some recommendations that we can make. In addition to other stakeholders, there are also other standards that are already out in the industry that our own recommended practice will be able to point to. We certainly don't need to rewrite all of the wonderful standards that are out there, such as transfer or MARC, KBART, counter usage, and sushi. So what we're able to do is link to those different standards and organizations like Crossref, the DOI being so important, so that we're not having to write all of that into the recommendation, but we can point people who are interested to the variety of standards that they may also want to be aware of when they're thinking about doing a migration. So in a longer presentation, you may hear from different publishers, vendors, and librarians about their own stories and experiences. So if there's ever a chance to hear another presentation about the Content Platform Project, you may be interested to learn more about the different perspectives from each stakeholder. And I think that what we realized as we as a working group started communicating and sharing our own experiences with each other was that it really did uncover, well, I had no idea a librarian did that, or well, I don't have any sense of what the content platform vendor does on their end. And so there was a lot of curiosity and exploration, and it just really made even more clear how much communication needs to happen across the stakeholder groups, not just, okay, librarians, you need to do these 10 things before the migration will be successful, but also what are each of the stakeholder partners having to do to prepare? What do they do when something goes wrong? Sharing all of that and what is important to each stakeholder has really been invaluable and something that we'll be able to share when we release the recommended practice. So we hope for the seamless transition with minimal disruption to our mutual customers, which are our users. And again, I think the group is very clear and on the same page that migrations are going to happen, and we need them to be done more efficiently with some standards and structure in place so that the users can just keep using the content, which is what we all want. So what we're hoping to deliver, and we're working on wrapping up now, is a list of recommendations, a communication plan, a checklist which will give some actions for each stakeholder group. And we're hoping that that's going to be presented in a way that, if you're in the publisher stakeholder group, you can see your own action items, but you can also see what the other stakeholder groups have to go through as well, to just give everybody more information about what a migration looks like overall and not just in the silo of the particular stakeholder. We'll also give a glossary of key terms, and as I said before, we will link to different industry standards that are already in place, so that somebody that is maybe they're migrating for the first time, that they really can have an overview of all of the places in the industry that a migration might touch, and that they can find resources that they need. So we're working on the draft right now and really hoping to have that available for comment this fall. And certainly we will not be able to make this recommendation successful without everybody's help. So we will absolutely be encouraging everybody to take a look and share your feedback. We want to make this as strong as we can. Because platform migrations are not going away. And so getting all the feedback we can will be really helpful. And so we'll hope to have this published in the new year. And the group is working really hard to meet that timeline. So in the meantime, I hope that you will consider reaching out. There is a web page on the NISO website. You can also reach out to Athena or I if you are interested in learning more or participating in some way. We'd love to have you. Thanks.
Thank you, Kim. Really appreciate your work on this project. So our last presentation for this set is on the Open Discovery Initiative. And to present that, we have Rachel Kessler from ProQuest. Rachel, thank you.
My pleasure. Great. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for having me. My name is Rachel Kessler. I'm normally a product manager at ProQuest. Today, I'm here with my NISO ODI hat. ODI is the Open Discovery Initiative. I'm a co-chair of the standing committee. And today I'd like to just give you sort of an overview about what we do, much like I think everybody else. I think you'll hear some common themes with us as well. Okay. So just to make sure everybody's aware of what discovery is, we're talking about these big web scale discovery services that libraries tend to subscribe to, where they index content from content providers as well as their own records in an effort to try to allow library patrons to search basically all of the library's complete offering. So the way we think about this ecosystem of discovery services is that there are three stakeholders, main stakeholders, and obviously there's different types of content providers, but and different types of libraries, but these are sort of the main three groups that we think about. And the main problem is really that no one knows what anybody else is doing, right? I mean, sometimes even within organizations, the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. So you've got the content providers contributing their records to discovery services, right? And you've got the libraries who are sitting there saying, hey, is the package that I subscribe to, is it searchable in my discovery system? They don't really, even the content providers are wondering sometimes, right? Did you get my update? Is all of my content in your discovery service? So there end up being a lot of questions that could be not easily solved, but somewhat remedied just through more discussion and collaboration. So some of these challenges, for example, we mentioned what content do the content providers actually contribute? What specific collections? Are they contributing all of their collections, just a few? Is it all of the data within the collection, or are they leaving out some of the records? Which metadata elements? Is the discovery service indexing the full text, or are they only indexing abstracts, for example? And these are things that libraries want to know as well. The discovery services also need to receive data from content providers. they probably prefer not to receive it in a million different formats. So which standards are best for content providers to deliver data to discovery services? There's also issues around usage. What kind of statistics are useful to libraries and content providers, right? Would it be possible maybe for all discovery services to provide the same way of tallying usage statistics so that content providers can actually compare like to like when looking at usage reports? So you can see there's a lot of need, and we have a very, very wide remit as a group. So just to go over the goals broadly, really they're all about transparency, and it's making sure everyone has the info that they need to make responsible decisions and provide the best possible user experiences. And again, this can be about our recommended practice is really about absolutely anything that's related to the central index functionality within discovery services. So we're not at all new, by the way. I think discussions about the Open Discovery Initiative began at ALA in 2011. Since then, we released a recommended practice, I think in 2014. After the recommended practice, the working group retired and the standing committee took over. It's been 6 years since that recommended practice was released, and not all problems have been solved. So just now, a couple of them, I think June of 2020, we released a new recommended practice, or I should say more of an updated recommended practice, to try to address some of the issues that we were still seeing. So on that note, I'm not going to go into a whole lot of depth about the new recommended practice, but I wanted to just highlight a couple of the biggest changes. One is that we've added a section for libraries. So the way the recommended practice has been structured is that we have a recommended practice for each stakeholder group. Now, the first recommended practice outlined responsibilities for content providers and discovery services, and I think our assumption was that, well, libraries are the customers. It's the content providers and the discovery services who have to make sure that the libraries are happy. But the more we have talked to libraries and content providers and discovery services, what we've found is that libraries also need to take responsibility as much as possible for their configuration, for maintenance, for advocacy with content providers and vendors, for training. And so we've created a new section just for libraries. We also, a lot of our newest recommendations are to support A&I participation. While content providers, by and large, full-text content providers have participated in discovery, A&Is have not, because they feel more like the records themselves are their IP. And that's their main value, as opposed to full text providers who are mostly interested in driving traffic to their own platforms for the full text. So we've been looking at what are the challenges, how can we make A&I databases participate. So we've added recommendations around authentication, grouping and merging, branding, making sure that A&I databases, that their records maintain their individuality and that they're recognized as the property, I suppose, of the vendor, and that they're getting the credit. We also added detailed specifications for collection level and title level reports, and these reports are much more granular than what we had previously prescribed. The idea is to give both content providers and libraries a much better idea of what is actually included in the discovery service. So both, not just at the collection level, but also at the title level, as well as what metadata elements are being indexed. So a couple of quick Q&A. So there's no way our organization will ever be able to do all of this, right? I said there's a really large remit. We've got a lot of requirements in there. Should we just not participate? And no, definitely not. We don't actually really expect everyone to do everything. If that happened, great, but we're aware that we're asking a lot. Our recommended practice, I think, is more of an ideal situation. Really what we're about is transparency and communication. So do what you can, and then just let us know and let your what the other stakeholders know, what you are doing. That's really all that we ask. We're not expecting perfection, and we know that it takes a lot of guts to submit a conformance statement knowing that you're not perfect. So we really appreciate when you do. What is the audit process for conformance? So we're really more of a recommended practice than we are a standard, and we don't do an audit. Also, since we're all about transparency and communication, we're really hoping that you're participating in that same spirit, and that you are being genuine and open with us when you do submit a conformance statement. So if that's the case, then why bother participating at all? What is in it for content providers? So it allows you, by conforming to technical standards, you simplify the data transfer process, right? You make it easier to make sure that all of your metadata is going into discovery services, and that you are also, that you're contributing the most rich possible records, which will also drive them to the top of search results. And really, you're just letting libraries know, what libraries are your customers, that you really care about their complete research experience, not just their experience on your platform, which says a lot for your organization. And for libraries, they get to develop a deeper understanding of how the discovery service works just by diving in and communicating more. They will be equipped with tools to support good decision making on how to configure their databases, on what to activate, and then they'll be able to create the best possible user experience, so that the patrons get the most out of their libraries, out of their discovery services. So on that note, I want to thank you for your time. And if this at all interested you, please feel free to reach out to us or visit our website. We have, you can see our site here, and then we also have, this is our email address. So please feel free to reach out and find out how you can get more involved. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. So I just wanted to thank all of our presenters today. I think this was a really hoping all of you in the audience got a taste of some of the work we do at NISO and a taste of the kinds of efforts that go into creation of standards and recommended practices. I think, Rachel, you said something in your presentation that I thought was a really good overview. You said no one knows what anyone else is doing, and I think that's true in our industry. It is really imperative that we're all working hard toward our own outputs and our own objectives, but in our industry, it's really essential that we talk to each other and share. And so the standards creation allows formal mechanisms for us to share our structures, our perspectives, our experiences in ways that then create tools that then we can all use to build on to move all of us farther. So I hope that comes through, and that you'll take a look at these presentations. They're all included on the NISO site, along with all the other work we do. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Thanks.